Morning everybody, welcome back to another video. What I wanted to do today is give you a little bit of an update on some of the things that are going on in America and around the world that are relating to the changes that I said were going to happen in my book, Entering the Fourth Dimensional Matrix, where I talked about how the matrix system, like political, governmental, the monetary system, financial system, medical system, religious system, how these matrix programs have to change in order for humanity to move forward on a more spiritual fourth dimensional timeline, and versus the old timeline that we were on, which was the biohuman, where those systems were used to control and harm humanity. And one of the things that I think is important to point out, and I mentioned a little bit in the last video I did on the voting and free will and how these things happen, is that everything happens when it's supposed to happen. And the idea for that is that had Trump done a second term and beaten Biden the last time, he would not be doing the things that he wants to do this time. He would not be appointing the people that he wanted to appoint to those positions, because at the time they were against him. That in order for the systems to change as they're going to be changing, it has to be within a certain time. In other words, everything has to fall in a certain order. So him getting put into office now for a second term is because it was time for the things that he wants to do to happen. Everything that happened during the last 4 years has, and I've mentioned this many times, that humanity and humans, people, will not want to change as they're comfortable. The last 4 years have made people very uncomfortable, has shown them the corruption of the current systems, and has made people want changes within the system. So again, he's falling in the right place and time. And one of the things that he talked about doing when he gets into office is releasing the UFO files that have been classified in the past. And that's important because you also now have hearings going on in Congress relating to UFOs and alien contacts, and the idea that we're not alone, supposedly. And this plays into what I mentioned in the video about the voting, is that many of the channelers have talked about in 2025 may very well be our year of first open contact with other species. And by Trump releasing the paperwork, if in fact he does do that stuff, and Congress having those hearings, it's keeping that in the mindset of people. It's making people more open to that possibility, more accepting. So in the event that it happens, there's not going to be as much fear and panic going on as would normally have happened. So that's one thing. One of the other things that he's talking about doing and reshaping the entire government is appointing Musk and the other guy, I can't remember his name, as efficiency experts. In other words, they're going to go through the governmental systems. They're going to start trying to eliminate the waste, particularly the monetary waste, which will help the budget, which in turn can bring down the deficit that we have, that is going to basically destroy the world if it isn't taken care of at some point. So they're going to be changing the very fabric of the government by, in essence, reducing its size, cutting out that which isn't needed, and redoing the budget. So that's a huge step. Others have talked about it, but they've never done it. They've just moved people around. Clinton was a big one. I remember he wanted to talk about cutting the size of the government, particularly in the White House and staff and so on. Well, he got rid of some positions, but really all he did is move military personnel into those positions instead of the regular civilian personnel. So he didn't change anything in that respect. One of the other things that has happened is that he's talked about stopping the wars, the Ukrainian war, Russia, the Middle East there with Israel and others, and Iran, that he's already been making phone calls to these leaders, and that these so-called terrorist groups and others have already, including China, have already been reaching out to him, saying that they want to negotiate, they want to get on a good stand with us, they want us to move forward. And that relates to the idea of maybe bringing humanity a little closer together to where we start working better with each other and stop some of the excessive killing that's going on to provide energy for others and to keep that war machine going. Another area that he's talked about that's going to have a huge impact, particularly on the medical field, is by appointing JFK to oversee, I think it's the health secretary, or is over the Food and Drug Administration and others. And his goal is to get rid of the food additives and the chemicals that are mostly banned in other countries, but they're allowed to be put in our foods here in America, which is leading to the so-called obesity problem and the health issues that we have, which keeps that health machine rolling along just like the war machine that they have through the Pentagon with all the bombs and the planes and the military stuff. Remember, the more wars keeps the military machine going, making more money. The sicker people are in America, the more money is made by the healthcare system. Well, that system is going to have to change, and JFK is talking about revamping a lot of those agencies in order to get rid of a lot of that chemicals and things that are done in our food in order to make us and people more healthy, which again will change the healthcare system because it'll cut down on how many people get sick. Also talking about dropping prices on medication, and he wants to have the money put into research on the side effects of the medication instead of just for creating new medications. More indulgence on the side effects of it. And that plays into something I mentioned before, that eventually they'll be using the person's DNA in order to find out which medication and which dosage would work for them, because each of us is different. There's no carte blanche right across the board, everybody getting the exact same, which is what they do now. They're protocol systems. They give everybody the same thing, and they either get better or they don't get better, and which they don't really care in that respect because they simply have a system. Well, he could make some huge impacts in how that's being done. One of the other things that's talked about is getting rid of the illegal criminals in the country and a whole lot of other things that are affecting our budgets, affecting the safety of people, the cities, and getting people to, in essence, follow the way the laws have been written. And there's nothing wrong with bringing people into the country, but they did the same thing in Mexico and these other countries as they did in Cuba and other places. When they were allowed free immigration, they essentially emptied out their prisons and sent everybody here. Again, that's the kind of thing that we don't need as a country because it hurts everybody here, and we want to move forward, not backwards. One of the other things that has been going on that has come up in the news relating to the healthcare system, that's going to be a big thing. I get is a headline in. It said, Super Agers Breakthrough. It's the AARP bulletin, and occasionally they have some good stories in there. But and I talked about before how a lot of the medical technologies are going to be released, and there's going to be new information, a lot of it relating to AI. And what the title of this is now, how scientists are finding new ways to detect and treat the diseases of aging even before they begin. And in part of the article, one of the things that they wrote in here is, a mind-boggling tsunami of research is suddenly emerging from universities all over the world. In labs, old, frail mice that are share blood with younger mice become healthier, stronger, and live longer. Researchers believe this technology could one day be applied to humans. Such advances, which not long ago were the domain of science fiction novels and superhero movies, are now within sight. What they're talking about doing is changing the system as it is now to trying to keep people alive as long as possible, to keep people healthy as long as possible. Yes, you'll live longer, but the idea is to get back to the concept of keeping people healthy so they can be more productive as they get older. They talk in here a lot about some of the genetic research, how they've been able to look at various markers and be able to detect certain things like dementia, heart disease, and other things before they get really settled in the body, basically when they start. That kind of goes back to the idea of CRISPR, which is the program I talked about in, actually the last book as well, Entering the Fourth Dimensional Matrix, where they go in and they change the DNA of a baby inside the womb so that it becomes resistant to certain diseases, and change their genetic markers so they may not get heart disease or something else if it's within their family line. Well, this is doing that more along the lines of doing it to people as they get older, by finding these genetic markers before an individual gets really sick and the disease gets settled into them, is being able to fix it before it gets to that point, which again is going to have a huge impact on the medical system when you suddenly don't have millions of people with cancers and heart diseases and dementias and other things that are running around out there and providing a huge amount of income for the medical community. So this is potentially going to be able to change things like that. You know, they've talked about the idea that the organs within the body age at a different rate. And as I've told you before, the organs are different vibrations, and each person's organs are a different vibration. And eventually it's going to lead to the vibrational therapy, where they will be able to repair the organs of each individual. They'll also, as I said, use their DNA in order to get them the right medications, for at least temporarily. Because remember, people have a hard time getting better when they are in pain. And that comes back to the idea, and one thing that they did not mention in this article, but again, we're moving in the correct direction, but what hasn't been mentioned is the idea of dealing with the emotional issues that people have, which is the basis for all of these medical conditions. And you can say it's within the DNA and the family genetic line, and yes, it is. But they're there because of emotional issues within the family line. And when the individual deals with those, that will help repair the damage. It'll turn off those parts of the DNA so that you're no longer genetically predisposed to have a certain condition. And yes, it's been shown that we can turn our DNA on and off. We do not need a system like CRISPR in order to do that for us, because we can do it. We just have to get back to the emotional basis where that process starts. And the idea is people can't deal, as I've talked about, people can't deal with their emotional issues if they are in pain. So the idea is using the medical system in order to help deal with the physical issues so that the person can then focus on the emotional side and have the healthcare professionals work more in line with helping them along that same line, along that emotional line, so that they can get better. You know, it's coming. Like I say, we are progressing, and it shows you that, as I said, a tsunami of research is suddenly emerging. Why? Because we're moving forward. We're moving forward on a better timeline, a timeline where humanity is going to be helped by technologies, by AI. They've also mentioned the idea now that AI is available for people who do the home health care, and some healthcare providers, that if they have the home health care, they're helping someone and they have a question, they can tap into AI, explain what's going on, and they can get answers. Now, they're not saying it's a substitute for a doctor or for regular medical treatment, but what they're saying is that they're starting to be able to use AI even in the home to help people, to help each other. And I've already told you in the book about how it's being used in hospitals and operating rooms, and how that is going to expand down the road so that more will be able to be done with less error as we move on down the road. So anyway, I think that's kind of everything that I wanted to cover. But just remember that these systems, they are changing. Decide which line you want, which timeline you want to go down. Do you want to go down the more spiritual timeline? Do you want to go down the timeline where we use AI, where we use technology to help humanity not only live longer, so to speak, but be healthier the entire time, be more productive as we move along? And that's what our goal is. Our goal is to get rid of these other systems, not get rid of them. Well, eventually we'll get rid of them, but the idea is to change them, to change all these systems so that we can move forward on a spiritual timeline. Anyway, have yourself a great day, folks.